Okay, welcome everyone to a special episode of TNT Live. I am Daniel Boardman, and the only one class Now, there's some other people here. So, with us today, our special guest is Benjamin Dichter, BJ Dichter, the spokesperson for the Freedom Convoy, whose new book just hit #1 on Amazon, Honking For Freedom, which gives you a behind-the-scenes take on the Freedom Convoy. But also with us is Greg Stanley of Diverge Media, who we are teaming up with, one, because I really respect Greg and Diverge and the work they've done. But two, like I was very close to on the ground. I was like in a lot of this. I was in Ottawa. I have a bit of behind the scenes stuff. So there's a lot of information that I just kind of take for granted behind the scenes, and it's hard to parse out what the outsider knows and what the insider might know. So I figured, why not team up with Greg, who was covering this from afar, who saw the live streams, is following the commission closely, has his own coverage, and sort of tag team this interview where we can, get to the reality of it. So, Greg, thanks for helping out. Thanks for joining us. And if you guys aren't familiar with Diverge Media, I suggest go check it out. If you want to support truly independent Canadian media, like, subscribe, blah, 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 to the National Telegraph, also Diverge Media. So without further ado, Benjamin James Dichter, BJ, how are you doing? How's it? Does it feel good to finally have this thing out?
It does. I love your pitch. It's blah blah blah. Just follow the links. You're an amazing pitch man. Yeah, it does. It feels a little bit of a weight off my shoulders. Although I imagine the book will make a couple of people a little bit uneasy and uncomfortable. But again, the feedback I've been getting has been amazing. There's been a whole bunch of people that read it the first day, which was shocking. And just very emotive, very supportive messages about they laughed, they cried. It struck home with them, emotionally and personally and all that sort of stuff. So it was, it's quite cool. It's been amazing.
Yeah, that's great. So I think a lot of people might be expecting, considering the last few weeks, a bit more mudsling, but the book does not really focus on the recent drama around the Emergencies Act and all that. Am I correct to say, I've ordered a copy, but it hasn't arrived yet. It's more the story of the Freedom Convoy and not so much the current Emergencies Act shenanigans. Is that an accurate description?
Yeah, because remember, the manuscript for the book was finished several months ago, and we've just been doing edit after edit after edit, and we just wanted to finish at basically Bitcoin, at the Bitcoin part, and then have a conclusion. And there were some chapters we omitted. There were some stories we omitted, like you guys, after both you and Wyatt, after you had been embedded in the Freedom Convoy, which would be very interesting to know your opinions of what you saw in terms of testimony, because you were there yourself. But going down to the Bitcoin conference in Bitcoin Miami, I mean, we were going to talk about that too, but that really wasn't relevant to the core essence of the story, which was all about emotion and love and freedom, and as you call it, the hippy dippy stuff.
But I call it hippy dippy bullshit. But yeah,
well, it's not bullshit. It's important. Those are the things that made the Freedom Convoy unique. That's what made it strong. The fact that we were able to all come together around, these values of love and hope and freedom and stuff. So I wanted to focus on that end of it and make it just all the positive things that transpired during the Freedom Convoy. And I think we did a good job, but you'll let me know after you read it. You should have told me. I would have given you a copy.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I can cancel the order and you can send it to me. That's I will say, right. I cheated on you. I got this book that came out today, my nerdy fantasy, whatever stuff. That's what I've been reading, and while writing an article today on mask mandates. So,
oh, that sounds like
behind
fun.
the scenes of how cool I am.
Yeah. No, I sent a copy to. Jordan Peterson got a copy, Rupa Subramanya got a copy, and a couple of other people. People just want to review it and want to talk about it a little bit later on. And I think we'll be doing some articles. And so, yeah, if you want a copy for the National Telegraph, for you and the great editing team at TNT to review and report on. Same for you, Greg at Diverge. If you guys want copies, I'll send you one. You can take a look at it.
Yeah, I'll pay. I'll pay for it. I'll be a good boy.
All right. Okay. I appreciate
All right,
that.
so I think this is a good place
We got
to
lots
pass
of
it
legal
off.
bills we got to cover, so
So I think it's a good place to pass it off to Greg, because you're the outsider here, and I was very, orbiting around. So as I guess, well, I'll let you ask the questions that you find most pressing.
Oh, no pressure. Okay. Well, you were on the ground. My understanding is, I guess this would be to BJ, but there was 3 runners that when you were broke your leg, you had 3 different runners, you said in your testimony, down on the ground and then relaying information back to you. So one of those was Daniel, and one of those was Solomon Sema. Who was the other one? Was it Wyatt?
No, it was actually Dagny. So
okay.
Dagny, which there's a whole bunch of controversy around Dagny because I don't know, she's a liberal, whatever. I knew if the conservatives were trying to push her on us, and she managed to. I didn't know. So a little bit of background, just for clarification, because people are attacking me all the time. Oh, you had an Obama staffer there. It's like Barack Obama himself was in the hotel. It's kind of how they treat it. The Conservative Party tried to get Dagny, and I didn't know the name. They just said a girl, and I didn't pay attention to their email because it's from the Conservative Party. I don't really care what they think, to be entirely honest. And they said they have a girl, and I said, no, thanks. We have messaging down pat. That's why it's gone global. If we need somebody, I'll let somebody else know. And then, a week after we got there, things got a little busy, and Tamara walks into my room with Dagny and says she's got PR experience, political PR experience. So I gave her kind of like the 30-second interview.
So just to interject there, who introduced Dagny to Tamara?
That I don't know.
Huh.
That
okay.
I don't know.
Because that's immediately what goes through my mind. It's like they sent, so just to back that up, there's emails sent to you suggesting Dagny should be a part of public relations messaging.
In January, before we even got to Ottawa.
Okay, and then you're in Ottawa. How long before Dagny shows up with Tamara?
If I can remember the date correctly, I think around February 6th-ish.
Okay.
Something like that.
So this is right in that time frame. I don't even need to say anything to you. But the 4th to the 7th, that kind of area. Okay. So Dagny comes in and continue. Sorry, I cut you off there.
So Dagny comes in, and I gave her the kind of the 30-second interview that you give people when I've been in those business positions, believe it or not, in the past, and where you just got to size somebody up quickly. And she had she had proper PR training. She knew her stuff. She understood how to message, and I gave her a test. And I said, okay, well, listen, I need to do a presser on. I can't remember the issue was. I said, go do a presser, and just bring it back to me in an hour or something. Let me see how it is. And I did it. And she came back a half hour, 45 minutes later. And I'm like, wow, this is really good. And I'm like, it's a little too government bureaucraty, but it's good. So let's just kind of, modify it a little bit and get some of the terminology that I would use in a presser or in any sort of communications. We put it out there, and she was great. So she was there for, I don't know, a day or 2 days or something like that. Then I hear Rebel News, Sheila Gunn Reid and Ezra Levant, and who is this Obama person that's there? And I'm like, I don't know, ask the Conservative Party, because I didn't realize it till after that it was that girl. And she came into my room. She was doing the running in the morning. She came up at, I don't know, 9, 10 o'clock. And I said, hey, Dagny, I got a question for you. Are you liberal? Obama? Something you didn't tell me? And she said, she kind of rolled her eyes. She's like, yes, I was. I'm like, okay, what do you mean you were? Explain. She says, I was 19 years old, living alone, out of my parents' house, and whatever sort of issues she had. She went out on her own at a very young age. And, I saw, I'm young. I'm kind of, we're all liberal when we're younger, wanted to change the world, saw messaging. This was, and that's how she got into politics. She got sucked into it. And the last straw for her was all the COVID stuff and the mandates. And that's when she said she's out. Like, okay, at that point, I've been working with her for a couple of days, and all these experts, on the war campaign who know about running large staff in the middle of chaos as you're fighting with the government. It's like, I'm sorry, dude. You were limited in the number of resources we had. She worked out great. And she told me that was her story. So I gave her the benefit of the doubt. And you know what? She worked out great for the rest of the time. From a communication standpoint, she was fine.
And so just the bounce. Sorry, my kids came in. That's if you
That's
see
all
me
right.
distracted. So now, Dagny, were you running ideas off of other people when you were doing the PR with Dagny, like to balance
Yeah, of
things
course.
out? Were
Of
okay.
course. Of
So
course. Yeah.
so you didn't know till after. That's the takeaway from that.
Yeah, I
So you
didn't know
found out a few
until
days
like a
after.
day. Yeah, once we issued a press, because we're trying to get a hold of messaging, because everybody in the world was calling their own press conferences. Like a guy who was supposed to be watching some trucks named Tom Razzo. I have no idea where the hell he came from, and he's like, oh, I'm just going to be a ghost. No one will know I was ever here. I'm like, all right, great. He's the worst ghost I've ever seen. He keeps coming back to haunt you. But I thought, okay, great. So all these people started doing their own ad hoc conferences, and I'm like, okay, well, we got to get a hold of this. We need to issue a press release. Called Tamara, again, we talked like 20 times a day. And I said, okay, Tamara, we got to issue a presser just to get the messaging under control. And she said, cool. I said, I'm going to put myself, Dagny, you as a messaging contact point. Is there anybody else you want to put? And she said, oh, put Chris Barber. I said, okay, so we'll put the four of us on there. All messaging comes from us. And just because Chris was dealing with trucks right on the ground, he had the most, as I said in testimony, he actually had moral persuasion. So those were the four that we put on the press release, just to kind of, open up the lines of communication. Because at that point, it was just myself and Tamara, because that's who was listed on the GoFundMe. It was the two of us. So all the media inquiries were coming to her or me, and anything that was coming to her, she was sending to me. So I was getting 100% of everything. And I'm like, okay, well, let's kind of, division of labor a little bit. Dagny's good with messaging. She's helping with the PR or whatever. So that's kind of how the framework came about.
So when did you get on the ground then, Daniel? So you broke your leg, was it the 4th?
I broke my leg on the 4th.
Yeah,
okay, so and then you show up when?
I wasn't there at the beginning. It's like we knew of it been recovering before. It's sort of, I don't remember what date I came in, because I wasn't sort of staying in the adjacent room until after he broke the leg. Because Salman and I had gone down together before that and gone for a couple of days to live stream and do this. And then once we kind of got the feeling that, like, okay, this isn't like a thing. It's like it's the thing. We made a trip back to Toronto, grabbed more supplies, came back in, and I think
which
at that
is
point,
what I was going to tell you, Daniel. You were there, and then you left, and then you came back, right? So
yeah,
you were there pretty early, from what I remember.
Yeah, I was there, like, not at the beginning when the trucks were moving in, but like the end of the first week.
I
came up there, and like talked to like, I actually brought a bunch of stand-up comedians around and did like a comedy show on the main stage, as part of like a freedom comedy show. It was like the original thing I did, and then stayed for a couple of days covering and live streaming, and then like went back for like more supplies and to grab equipment and whatever, to be like, okay, like to hunker down. Like I'm gonna need more than like 3 pairs of clothes to do this. So like, let me, okay, I didn't have a razor. I'm like, okay, let's grab all this, and then it kind of became like a thing where, like, okay, Ben had broken his leg, so he couldn't move, and he had like, to like the hotel, he added like a different room on the side. So Salman and I stayed there, and like we would essentially.
Well, hold on. What that was, just so we're clear about who the spokesperson was for this convoy, that was the media room.
Yeah,
Tom Razzo wasn't sleeping in that room. Daniel Boardman and Salman were sleeping in that room because that was adjacent to my room. And the reason we made that the media room was because it was difficult for me to get around. So that second hotel room didn't actually have beds in it. It was like a conference room next to a hotel room. And that's where we did all the media.
Yes, that's what, yeah.
Sorry. From So the first weekend you show up, and then you come back like a few days later with more supplies. What was the feeling on the ground, I guess, from the first day you showed up? Like I guess, and then kind of where that situates in time frame, and then coming back, was there anything different? Was
It was
what is
quite
the differences?
it was quite like I came in near the beginning. So I came in and like during the day when we first came in, it was at the point where it was just like jubilation and honking, right? And like it it was amazing. You just saw how much it sprawled, and you get off and there's people with Canadian flags everywhere, and like this like from Saskatchewan, it's like barbecuing, and everyone's just so friendly and offering you things, and this covered in snow, but there's just everywhere there's covered in snow, you see like 3 to 4 people just individually grabbing snow shovels and clearing out the roads, and just making the city quite livable and clean. Like it was chaotic but incredibly.
And by the way, I have pictures of that, and you'll notice in the pictures that I posted some on Twitter. You know what you don't see? You don't see any blocked streets. You do see lots of streets in the downtown core where the parking is taken up with some big rigs that are bobtailing, meaning there's no trailer attached. But the only street that was actually blocked was Wellington Street. The rest of the residential streets are actually commercial streets.
There was a single lane across Wellington.
There was still a path. Yeah, there was still a path.
So that's kind of the big misconception, right? That the whole narrative at the Public Order Emergency Commission is running with is that it started good and then got worse. But I mean, that's why I'm asking. So what, like you're saying, lanes were open, a lot of excitement. So when you're first there, was there honking? Because that's the big one, right?
Yeah, lots of honking, like not at night, but during the day, like before the injunction, during the day, it was like honking for freedom. It was like,
it was localized to the stage. It was around the stage area. It wasn't around the whole city. That's the whole problem.
But it was like, it was on Wellington, but I also say there was honking in like a sort of a few block radius of that, like in the downtown, but no one was there, right? So these weren't like residential neighborhoods where like the city was paralyzed.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that hasn't come up, and just want you to elaborate on that a little bit, because as a casual observer, they're not laying out the maps. They're not laying out like, here's the streets, here's what buildings were on it. They just keep repeating and repeating and repeating. And if you repeat something totally enough times, right, then people will like totally believe it. But the residential area that they keep talking about, what's actually in these streets in the area? Because my understanding is it's a pretty commercial area. There wasn't really a lot of residential. Not to say that there isn't any residential, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a residential area as they're referring to it. That's my understanding.
No, it wasn't.
It's residential, like the same way that downtown Manhattan is on the commercial centers, like around Wall Street. Is that residential? No, that's commercial. That's a commercial neighborhood, and there may be the odd residential building, but to call it a residential neighborhood is just a lie. And what's frustrating is, there's supposed to be a side that's defending us. They're not saying this. They're ceding grounds to all the narrative from the other side, which is why I couldn't deal with them anymore.
You mind if I just read something into the record on that note? So to the letter that was sent from Tamara, and I say from Tamara loosely because it was my understanding from testimony that's emerged is it was worked back and forth, drafts between the mayor's office itself and legal counsel, Keith Wilson and team and co. And they worked out the wording on this. And what one of the lines is that we have to stay in Ottawa for the long haul to reach our destination. But then they go on to say, many of the citizens and businesses in Ottawa have been cheering us on, but we were also disturbing others. So they're feeding this narrative even in their letter to the mayor. So this is why I'm bringing this up, because I said when I had my interview with Jim is I don't see any difference in the narrative coming out of the government lawyers and everybody that wanted the justification for the EA, and the narrative that's coming from the Justice Center and the lawyers representing the protesters, other than one caveat, which is, but the threshold wasn't met. It seems like that ceded ground we're talking about, like, yes, they were disturbing others. It got worse. There was all these affinity groups. We didn't know who it was.
Lie. All lies, all lies. So would
And
you
you're
keep
saying,
lawyers
just to
who
back
say
this up
that?
though, before we get carried away,
Yeah.
it started chaotic. There's honking and stuff. It got better as time went on. When the injunction came in, it cleaned up, if anything. It didn't get worse. Am I understanding that
Yeah,
correctly?
it was pretty quiet by the time that the injunction came around anyways, right? Remember, all these guys, many of these truckers had their families in their trucks. Their kids need to sleep as well as they need to. So this fantasy that these phantom truckers seem to have this amazing ability that they don't need to sleep is complete nonsense. It's complete. If anybody
Well,
would hear
hey,
the
hey,
honking
BJ, but when you're
louder, it would be
sieging a
them.
city, you have some crazy energy. So,
Well,
Yeah, so like,
what? You know what? Hold on. That's important. That's important because what the government is trying to tell people that a whole large group of Mad Max truckers came to Ottawa to overthrow the government from Alberta and didn't bring one weapon.
those
Have they
dang
ever met a
Albertans, eh? Those
conservative
crazy
in their
people out
lives?
west.
Do they know what conservatives are? Like, they've never met one. Like this, you have to believe. In order to believe the convoy was in any way what the government and what the Liberals are trying to frame, you have to believe that Sikhs are white supremacists. You have to believe that conservative truckers who want to overthrow the government would come so unarmed, and that illegal parking, I must say illegally, bylaw infractions in parking is warranted to bring in martial law, Canada's equivalent of martial law. That's what you would have to believe. It's crazy.
Well, to be fair, the Liberals get really scared of any guy that wears Carhartt. So that's all you got to do. It's basically an instant way. They're like, I don't know. I don't think there's any bridge that can. We can't. Don't. They're too different.
Is that vegan? I don't know. That doesn't look vegan to me, man.
So, sorry, Daniel. And then
I
you
want
and
to set the
Solomon
record
are going
straight
out.
on the honking in the timeline. So
Daniel,
I'd say it was
just let him finish.
No. Okay. Well, I was just gonna say, and you and Solomon were going out together.
Yeah.
Kind of
and then
reporting
split off
back.
sometimes.
Yeah, so if you want to bounce back to where you were going to go with that anyways, but you and Solomon were going out on the ground and reporting back what you were seeing to BJ, who was incapacitated at the time.
Yeah, and other people like who would come in the convoy thing. Like, so, it was, what you see on the ground. And one of the things I also like doing is I would go and interview the truckers, sometimes on camera, sometimes off camera. Like the truckers are like, what morale, what are you there for? Like when the GoFundMe got canceled, like, is this, do some journalism stuff, just talk to them and get a sense of what they're doing and beat on the street. So yeah, I would report back and interview and see what's going on and all that. Salman, especially near the end, was a lot more tactical in his approach because he was right about literally everything the police were doing near the end.
Yeah,
he was saying, you're losing here. He'd be like, tomorrow they're going to set up blocks here, here, and here. They're going to put pylons here, and you're going to see cops there. And it's like, listen to me and do this. And I'd be like, the first was like, okay, Salman, I believe what you're saying. And then, every day we'd go and he'd like come and show me, like, see, remember I said there'd be pylons there and cops there? I'd be like, yeah, you did. Okay. So with every day, him predicting with 100% accuracy what the police were going to do, it started to be a bit more like, okay, let's listen here. And I think Salman was probably the main advisor who kind of, I guess, swayed Ben into really understanding that kenneling the trucks onto Wellington.
That's a really important part because that was kind of where I was going with this is Solomon brought it up with, was it you, Daniel, and you relayed that back to Benjamin or how that shake out? But he brought up the fact that he goes, listen, this whole deal, like, he was very concerned about this. He goes, it's not a deal. They're going to kettle you in on Wellington. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But they're going to kettle you in. They're going to beat the crap out of you. And then there'll be a mass arrest and there'll be the end of things. And that was the messaging you got when you said, look, listen, there is no deal. You found out Dean French, the former chief of staff for the premier, who was responsible for a lot of the mandates people were frustrated about. And this is another thing I want to bring up, but everyone keeps making it about federal mandates at the commission. I think it's safe to say it was about all mandates, and maybe the Arrive Can app was the straw that broke the camel's back. So I don't want to get too much the questions in the lurch here and make murky things up, but we'll just leave it at that. So Solomon gave you this advice. And then kind of how did that shake out? When did he mention his concerns, and then around the deal there, how did that kind of happen?
As soon as he got wind, like we all put it this, we'll go back first. When they started going to the city with Dean French and talking to the city, we didn't know. I mean, Chad will confirm that. They told us after the fact, and they didn't tell us, oh, we had been going to the city. They told us, oh yeah, we're going to go to the city. And I said to our lawyer at the time, I said, no, you're not. You're not going to do that. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So as our lawyer in a class action suit, so I don't even know who you are to think you even have a mandate on this. You're here for the class action. So sit down and shut up and let us do our thing. But it just didn't matter. Oh, but we have to show a sign of good faith to the city. I'm like, we as too many people. You need to go and be a lawyer. We need to run a protest. But then somebody screamed the word camera and he ran, right? That's usually what happens.
Yeah, I mean, what I found so fascinating about, like, again, because like my days, we'd have breakfast. I would go do some filming, do some work, write articles, do my National Telegraph job, and then go back and report what I'd seen, be a person you could bounce some ideas off of, and someone I would help out that way. And one of the fascinating things, I just remember a day, I can't remember which day, where you guys were dealing with in the morning. It started like the JCCF wants to put out a press release.
No,
and
it was every day, man.
There was one day where I remember, like, they wanted to put out a press release, and this is what they were focused on. And I took a look at this press release, and oh God, was it horribly written? Like, how did these guys get through law school was number one. So
yeah.
And then two, I come back, do the work, and they're still on this press. Like, the other thing was, like, I remember you saying, like, no, stop this, do legal work, like, get the funds out unfrozen, do your job, like, be lawyers. Yeah. And they're like,
they didn't
no.
like that.
And I've never seen, I've never seen lawyers disobey a direct order to be lawyers and instead focus on a press release. You're like, I was just like, again, thank God they weren't my lawyers, but I was just saying, like, I'm like, what is going on? That sometimes you have lawyers who will disagree with you, but like they're contractually obligated to follow the instructions of their clients, at least in some respect, and they just wouldn't. They just wouldn't.
Well, and because the retainer that they gave us was not with us. It was with the JCCF. So we weren't their client. They said, oh, we're going to be your lawyers, but they weren't our lawyers. They're the JCCF's lawyers. So they came in lying through their teeth at us. Didn't matter. There's no repercussions because they technically didn't have a retainer with us. And I knew that. That's why when I saw the retainer, I just kind of dismissed it as like, I don't know what sort of clown show this stuff is. This is not how law is practiced. So I just kind of ignored it and figured, let's try not to cause too many waves. Let's try to get as many people working together. And you lawyers, just be quiet, go do law stuff, and leave the messaging and PR stuff to the messaging and PR team, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's go outside of the lawyers who weren't doing much legal work. They weren't the only people who were trying to grab a microphone.
No.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to go into this, but some of the things I watched and had to sort of use some of my contacts.
I don't want to get into too many names, but I'm sure you can throw names around. I'll just nod and but yeah.
Okay, yeah. So like one of the problems was like every group wanted to either join and it was like, great, you want to support us, but then there are a lot of groups, whether it be the group of like whatever Brian Peckford's Freedom Coalition, something Keith Wilson was a lawyer for, but has no idea what it is. They wanted to be like,
which was set up on January 24th, by the way. That's when it was created. Huh. And that came out in the testimony that Brian Peckford was paid for somebody.
Yes.
What was he paid for?
Let me interject that. It came up in the Dean French text messages. I think, right, that he was talking about bringing Peckford in, and then he mentions, don't worry about the funds, I'll take care of it. As like, okay, I'm paraphrasing, by the way, because I got to be careful, but it is in the Dean French text messages somewhere. I will find it. You just reminded me of it.
You mean I'm not making it up?
You mean I heard it somewhere? Yeah. No, it definitely was. It was somewhere in the evidence, and it's submitted to POEC. I will dig that out.
Yeah, there are other things that were like, every group wanted to get involved, and then there were some schisms, or not schisms. Like there's some trouble with like doctors. The dissident doctors came in and like wanted to be the spokesperson of this, and like that became another big problem because the few days that I was like giving, talking to the people running stage again, it was all an individual, like a cluster F bomb, but we didn't like Ben was pretty adamant on this, and I agreed with the strategy is we didn't want the message to be vaccines or any of that stuff because
because it's divisive, right?
it's divisive.
Not that it's divisive, but it's been made to be perceived that way by the government for the last 2.5, 3 years.
But also it's like a no-win, right? There's no way to win.
Well, it's a win for them because that's what they wanted. They wanted it to end as quickly as possible. Doug Ford wanted this protest to end because it's his provincial mandate, and as much divisiveness as they could create would be better for them overall, because then the convoy would be painted in a negative light as anti-vaxxer or whatever. It's like that's not what it was. That's why they were never on our side the entire time.
And the other thing with that is like I've made this point publicly, and it's like enough with the science. Like you're not going to be able to convince people. Like even if you like the best case scenario is you get every doctor in Ontario or every doctor in Canada to sign a letter and definitively prove, let's say, that the vaccine should not be mandated and carries higher risk than the government's claiming it to. The CBC brings on 100 people they give expert status to and says, no, you're wrong. And then wash it out. Like there's no way to win. Like you can't win this argument based off of that. So like all you can do is screw up by bringing in one crazy doctor who says something, about like, the devils and the semen of
which is exactly what happened in that press conference that I said, do not have that. That's not authorized. And they said, okay. And then they went and did it anyways and tricked Tamara into showing up. They said, Tamara, we need you for a meeting. Okay, they set up for a meeting or whatever. And then, it's a camera turned on. And apparently Tamara was so pissed.
Yeah. So like the other thing with this is like, I remember there was the one big press conference, the official press conference where the mainstream media was there, where you got overruled. And it would end up being this disaster. And like the thought was like, you could just see how many people were just like wanted the camera. So by this point, like all the different groups were swirling in for attention. And this official press conference was done in the lobby of the Sheraton. And all the mainstream media and all the alternative media was there. And this is the one where Glenn McGregor instantly hijacked it and started yelling about weapons at cuts. But before that, it was like,
Glenn.
Yeah. So, but before that, though, before the press conference sets up, like again, the mainstream media disperses us, alternative media, and some schmuck comes in to like run the press conference, like and point where people are allowed to go that like no one has any idea, whatever. But fine. But it would the agreement on this is like, okay, there's only gonna be two people, keep it small. Brian Peckford, and Tamara's a symbol of the convoy, and Brian Peckford and lends legitimacy to the movement because he's the former premier, signed the Constitution, blah 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 blah. But
just a little asterisk. Keith said to me, I don't know how far, and when we started to talk about, then they realized, okay, we're not going to go with this whole deal thing. So they're like, well, we need to get somebody who can talk to the government, the federal government. And I said, yeah, okay, I have no problem getting a mediator. Like, that's fine. And he says to me, I think I can get Brian Peckford. Would you be okay with that? And I'm like,
okay, you need to know that date.
Sure.
Because that's in the text records that came up, right? From someone else saying Peckford could be involved. Just say the word kind of thing. I'm paraphrasing again. But I can find the dates on that one probably. So if you can figure out when that actually happened, it'd be important.
Yeah, but he may that text might have been a week before he told me. Like, who knows? Because he was lying to everybody, right? And so I said, okay, yeah, sure, Peckford would be fine. He was just on with Peterson recently, and I've been speaking to Peterson semi-regularly. Spoke to Rex Murphy for quite a while, and I'm like, okay, like I'm cool with getting a mediator that gives us credibility. I don't have an issue with that. This is, great. Let's get somebody. I didn't know he was getting paid, and he was part of the same group that they were all part of that was trying to take control over the whole time. Like, I didn't go to the TBOF website. I didn't have time. I had problems to deal with, But wow, just scheming, all of them, just crazy.
Yeah, and just like on that note, on that press conference, the official one that blew up in everyone's face. Like I was there, like getting pushed out, and then before the thing, Randy Hillier starts walking in front of the thing, like he actually sets up behind the thing, and he brings like some of the doctors, like Paul Alexander, like who was like saying the vaccine's genocide.
Oh,
like
he brought Paul Alexander, did he?
Or I'm not sure he brought it, but like they both came out and like they
Okay.
went like they were just like both of them were like standing behind the thing and like they take pictures, and I messaged up, I'm like, guys, like Randy Hillier and like some of the doctors are trying to make this their press conference, and then I think it was maybe Dagny came down and like moved them off the stage, and it's just like no, and then like they were so pissed off that they couldn't be the center of attention that day and like stormed off, and it's like this isn't the Randy Hillier show or like this was like a press conference about trucks, like not vaccines. But that was just like again an insight every day into like some group trying to throw a press conference. And like I find it the funniest thing was Tom Marazzo after his EA commission testimony, whatever, walking by the mainstream media saying like, I'm not talking to you because you're fake news for the last 3 years. Like, dude, every day Tom Marazzo would walk up to the mainstream media and be like, talk to me. Every day he would ignore alternative media. And like the only time he ever like used alternative media was like to get it like when we helped him build his profile, like after the thing. And then like once you ask him questions, like blocked on Twitter. That was my experience with Tom Raz. I was like, hey, you can come on the show because, he got his bank accounts frozen. He was part of the convoy in some way. Tamara and Chris couldn't talk. Ben couldn't talk. So fine. All right, Tom, we'll talk about the convoy, get the message out there and do that. And I always remember like Salman was so angry. My phone's buzzing during the Tom Razzo interview. And I'm like, I know it's Salman because Tamara's in jail right now. So Tamara's in jail. And I say, Tom, is there any plans to maybe, since you're now you're figureheading this, you're building your profile. A lot of people listen to this. Like,
all the road captains left, all the trucks are leaving. Everybody's out of Ottawa. And then he decides I can't have a press conference. Like,
okay, so fine. He was last man standing press conference. Who cares, right? Like, we're all on the same team. Then I ask him, hey,
I remember seeing that and saying, wait. We just dealt with that yesterday. He's a day late. What's he doing?
He's fine. Whatever. Right? It's the Tom Ratzer show. But then I asked him, like, are we going to do anything are you going to plan anything for Tamara? Like, she's in jail. Are you going to run a protest and rally and sort of support Tamara? No, I don't think we should. We shouldn't be protesting for. He tells everyone not to protest at Tamara because we don't want to influence the court's decision. It's like, don't protest outside the courtroom and intimidate a judge. But you can protest at like Parliament Hill saying locking up this woman is aggressive. It's like, what? And it's like, well, let's just steer him off this topic because I was like, okay, this is like, what is wrong with this guy that he can't.
There's not much between the ears. That's the problem.
Yeah,
there's
like,
not much.
That boy's about as sharp as a bowling ball. Is to quote the great philosopher Foghorn Leghorn. But it's like, what are we doing that you can't like? So not only that, does he use this platform and to advocate for not helping Tamara. Tells everyone to specifically not help Tamara because we got to respect the law and blah, 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 blah. We don't want to. And then this is the a-hole who goes to the JCCF gala because it's like, it's a Tom Razzo show and gets Tamara thrown back in jail because he wants to shake hands with her. And like, I talked to Benjamin and like, you didn't go because you specifically didn't want Tamara in jail.
Because I knew everything is so politicized. If we had any communication at all, even attempts, somebody in the Crown's office would find out and they would arrest her just to make an example of her, just because this is all entirely political. So I wouldn't put her at risk for that.
And to your knowledge, did anybody reach out from the legal team to a judge on that order around the contact rules and verify just to make sure?
No, they would do what they were doing with us. Like what we were told is, the judge ruled that the protest is legal, so we're fine, right? Same thing. It's like, she can be with counsel And so she's fine. Did you check before? But we don't have
But
to. It's like that's
to clarify, to your knowledge, they never reached out to clarify with the judge or with like to clarify that they're on the contact order that was not allowed. Like they could have easily. The reason I'm asking is they could have called up or emailed or whatever, gone through the proper channels and said, "Listen, there's this event coming up. These people want to attend. This is the capacity. We'd be there. Is that okay?" Did that happen? To your knowledge,
I have no idea. I
Okay.
wouldn't know. I don't know.
I
can't say either way.
assume-
I would hope they did,
I would
but
presume no, based on what happened, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if it
Yeah.
did happen, right, I would presume that the JCCF would be waving that around, like we cleared this with a judge beforehand, right? So this is
you
like,
would think.
so you're like, there's, to my mind, there's only two options here: either literally the worst lawyers to ever exist, or two, sabotage. Right? There's no other explanation for just how bad they've been. And like, you know, I've appreciated the National Telegraph crowd because, you know, not a lot of, you know, crazy nonsense. You know, when we sort of lay out these facts, you know, back when Tamara was getting arrested, thrown in jail, like there wasn't a lot of like, you know, people seem to understand like, yeah, there's something fishy here. Like you can't have this. And like my line was always like, I don't really care what it is. Okay. I don't care if they're the worst lawyers of all time or they're deliberately sabotage. I don't care what the reason is. Like the result is you have bad lawyers and you have bad lawyers defending the convoy, which needs defending from the full resources of the federal government. So it's like you're going to play, you know, the let's say the 1974
we're
Dolphins.
getting a sports analogy.
Right? BJ earmuffs, right? Earmuffs. You're about to play the Super Bowl, and you're going with a high school team instead of a professional team. Like this is the JCF
CFL versus NFL.
CFL versus NFL. Like, yeah, you're bringing the Argonauts cheerleaders, not even the Argonauts, bringing the cheerleaders for the Argonauts to play the Patriots. Like, yeah, I get it. They have spirit.
I'd watch that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the lawyers.
Who do you bet on the cheerleaders? Who do you bet on?
I just found
what's
out
the
this
over
week,
under?
Daniel.
Even on an even game, right?
Daniel, I just found out this week. One of the lawyers had not been practicing law, and she had a yoga studio that went bust, and that's who they brought in to defend us. I'm like, oh my god, that definitely explains a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the JCCF used to be cool, but you know, like they never really recovered from that scandal with John Carpray and the judge. And
I'll let you in on a little secret. A little secret, and everybody who's listening. Okay, so imagine I'm in my room next to the media room where we're all kind of conglomerating and doing our stuff. It's towards the end of the day. Well, it's like 7 o'clock, so it's around the time where we're starting to worry. Because Hurt Locker Tom comes and says, "Oh, we're going to get raided." Every night he would do that. It's a Marazzo. That's why we called him Hurt Locker. Hurt Locker Tom.
No, it took me a second.
Yeah, so he kept every day. Oh, you know, we're getting notices from the police that they intend to raid tonight. Every night he did that. It was like the boy who, like, finally after 5 days of that, I'm like, yeah, I don't really care what he says. He's wrong every other night. So let's wing it. We'll see what happens, right? And so it was 7, 8 o'clock. I think, Daniel, you were out filming on the ground doing some reporting with Salmon, and most of the people dying down. I was dealing either, you know, I would do interviews at night, usually around 9:30 on Newsmax or something like that, or go into Twitter Spaces when I could, or just sending messaging. So I'm in that time of the day. And I get a call from a friend of mine who is quite famous and in the legal world. And this friend calls me and says, "Listen, hey, I just got wind that the JCCF is there." And I said, yeah. Why? What's the problem? And this friend says to me, "Get them as far away as possible." And I said, "Well, why? I thought they have a good reputation." And as it was explained to me, they used to have some halfway decent lawyers. And then this scandal that came up, with the following a judge around, which is crazy. And all of their legal team left. Their whole board left. Everybody left. This was explained to me, they don't have lawyers anymore. They just have activists with law degrees who they know nothing about law. And this person said to me, "Look at their case record. They lose everything. if you're going to take this seriously, you need to get real lawyers, get them as far away from you as possible. So I thought, oh, okay, interesting. So that was always sticking in the back of my head, that with all the things I had to navigate, now it's like, okay, how do I get this parasitic organization as far away from us as possible, because they're going to cause a lot of damage, right? So it is what it is.
Yeah, and like I think if people are looking for what's the reason the JCCF stayed on, like I don't.
We have a choice, man. We were
They have a
so
choice.
inundated with so many problems. They're saying we'll give you free legal advice on the class action suit. We said, okay, great. Then they started doing press releases. It's like, no.
Hey,
You go
well-
over there.
Well, you should know that nothing in life is really free.
Yeah.
Well, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but there's the other thing of like what the JCCF did well in sort of endearing themselves to a lot of people there on the ground in the truck cap is like, you know, they would give them the raw speech and like the sort of we're here to fight, again, the activist thing, like
The
we
locker
believe in
room
you,
speech.
right?
That's right.
Right, and you know, be drinking with them at night and like one of the boys. So you know, it's a group of truckers and like good on them. They value loyalty and you know. And, you know, it's going to be hard to say, you know what, you actually need some Bay Street suits coming in from Toronto to protect this thing. Like you need some serious sharks that have no morals and don't care about this convoy one way or the other, but just will do what you pay them to do and fight the government because they're pathological sociopaths who want to win. Right. That's kind of who you need. Right. Is just some, you know, sociopath who's like, okay, money, you're my client. All right, I'll find a whatever legal loophole to say this convoy was legal and the greatest, and I will argue that to infinity, like to the T. And I'm not going to be doing press conferences, right? You pay me to do work. I'm going to find, you know, this section of the charter and this case law, and I'm going to spend my day saying that, and I'm going to make this argument. Like that's what you needed, but. You know, Keith came in there and like, we're one of the boys and we got you and we're going to take down the government or not to take down the government, but like we're going to take on the government and we're going to do this for freedom and yada, yada, yada. It's like, that sounds good to someone who you think, oh, I got a really good lawyer here because they care. And, you know, to an extent that is good. Like, listen, it would be good if you could get a $1,000 an hour Bay Street lawyer who also said,
oh, for sure.
You know,
Listen, I was convinced for the first, well, not for very long, but to be honest. But, you know, I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, hoping that that's what would materialize and that, you know, the death and doom and gloom video, which was my very first encounter meeting the lawyers, when I explained that in the book, that little interaction. But my...
That came up in your testimony, right? The blow up?
What's that?
That came up in your testimony, the blow up, the argument?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. Honestly, the testimony went by like that. Like, I don't even remember what I said. It was so... I remember the JCCF guy that everybody liked until he started attacking me and trying to frame me. I loved it when he said, you broke into her Twitter account. I'm like, oh, buddy, you're desperate, eh? Like, you're really desperate to hang on to this narrative. And then Tamara comes in, the next witness, and says, yeah, no, I gave him my Twitter from the very beginning. He's really good at Twitter. God bless her. So, you know, they're all a part of this, whatever they're trying to do, and they're ceding all this ground to the other side. They're not representing the truth of what actually went on, the fact that it was peaceful right up until the time the police brought violence. That's when it got dangerous, when the police started beating people. And even then, people did not retaliate against the police, which is why there's so few, if any, charges laid. And it's frustrating that the former counsel, because he's no longer a lawyer for anybody at this point involved in the convoy, that the former counsel can become a witness in this testimony, which right away is red flags. And he gets on there because he has parliamentary immunity against defamation. That's why he did it, I'm pretty sure. And he makes a statement that the convoy had needed to end. No, that's what Trudeau says. And then our independent right-wing media keeps propping him up like the hero. He just took Trudeau's position. What is wrong with you? And
yeah, this also
what
frustrates me is they give the raw, like it'd be one thing if these guys were what they said they were, and these rah activists who aren't great at lawyering, but they're going to fight like hell for the convoy. But not only are they not great at lawyering, but they're pushing the government narrative and then intermittently making speeches about freedom. So it's not like they're even trying to defend the thing. I will say, I'll post a link to the book if anyone wants to see it in the chat. We have about 5 more minutes until 9 o'clock where you're starting a Twitter space. So if people want to ask you questions directly, I'll say BJ is hosting a Twitter space scheduled to start at 9, right? So it's 8:54 right now. So I think now would be a good time to sort of wrap up and segue into that. So if you do want to ask questions, BJ will be on Twitter, where you can come request a mic and talk to him there.
Okay, great. And I think what's most important, and the reason we're here, with all of that stuff that, Greg, you're working through diligently. And by the way, I thank you for that. And I know, Daniel, you and Wyatt are trying to, it's easier for you because you were there. It's more about communicating it to everybody. Even with all the nonsense that went on in the background, what we were dealing with, what Tamara and I were dealing with, the various groups, the truckers upset that they couldn't get money, the 800 trucks that were parked in some farmer's field and we couldn't find a place for them, that they were running out of food and running out of fuel, and then the city blocked the fuel trucks. Okay, so then what do we do? I guess we're going to have to get jerry cans because we have no choice at this point. So all of those things that we were dealing with.
Do we lose him at the end there?
Lent itself to really an amazing and positive story. The nonsense that
looks like you're cutting out
during the testimony in the commission.
It's the worst connection right now.
Yeah,
stories that you're all gonna love. That various people involved in the convoy went.
Oh, there he goes. I mean, I'll
until you read this book, send me messages saying I was laughing and then I was in tears, and it was absolutely amazing.
I think if you stop promoting your book, your Wi-Fi will come back.
Yeah, this is the book that government does not want you to read. We've learned that. Yeah, I think to sort of piece together what you said is like the Freedom Convoy was, what the media. I've never seen such a disconnect between what the reality was and what the media was saying when it came to the Freedom Convoy. Like sometimes they report like a kernel of truth and then twist it in a way that fits the narrative. So be it, right? Such is life. But I've never seen like this. Not only was this like not true, it was like anti-truth. Like the exact opposite of what's going on was being reported. And I also found it so fascinating by the people on the ground. One, like the individuality of people, understanding like what they were up against. And like, this is the bouncy castle and hot tub thing, is like the government tried to play this narrative of insurrection. And then the people themselves knew that, okay, how do I defeat this idea is like, well, I just bring a hot tub and a bouncy castle, and good luck trying to spin the narrative that this is a threat to national security.
Hey,
as
Canadians just have different siege tools. I think you guys are missing the point here. Americans, they storm the Capitol. Canadians, we bring our siege tools. They're bouncy castles and hot tubs.
Down to the
some
children
beer.
into Parliament.
Yeah, awesome.
Our paratroopers.
Oh, you got to have beer at a Canadian protest. Is it even a protest without beer?
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yeah, totally.
All right. So,
anyways, I got cut off when I was plugging the book, but the idea, honkingforfreedom.com, go there. You can buy it, not just Amazon's, on a few platforms where you can buy it. It's all the positive, warm and fuzzy stories that everybody's going to love. I think everybody comes off looking good because we tried to focus on the good aspects of people, minus a couple of people, but everybody else, I think we tried to do it in a classy way, and I think you'll agree it is.
And I feel bad we don't have time to mention, but the co-author, John Goddard, is an experienced investigative journalist who really helped you with timelines and stating out facts and doing all that. And I think it'd be remiss if we didn't at least give him a shout out before we ended the show. But when Ben, when you say we, it is you and John Goddard, who is an experienced investigative journalist. So on that note, thank you, Ben, for joining us. Greg, thanks for coming and helping out with this.
I just wanted to say one last word. Kudos to you on the bestseller.
Thanks, brother.
It remains to be seen how it's going to go from there. But your bestseller, and just having a forward from Jordan Peterson and having somebody like John Goddard help you put it together is no guarantees for anything. So kudos.
Yeah, no, we'll see. I'm starting with U.S. media when I'm in Boston this weekend, so I'm going to be on a couple of mainstream shows on Thursday and I think on Monday, if I'm not mistaken, and we'll see who else. I mean, all the requests are starting to come in. I'm starting to filter them just like I did during the convoy. So we'll see how much that'll help.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. If you want to ask BJ questions, I believe you're starting up a Twitter space pretty much when we end this. So
yeah, just give me about 30 seconds. I'll go to the room. Joe Rampart's going to co-host. Are you going to be there and co-host, Daniel, or what?
Yeah, if you want me to.
Greg, you going to be in there for a little bit?
Probably in a little bit. I'm going to get my kids to bed first.
Yeah, okay.
All right, parent those kids. Keep them alive. Teach them lessons and such. All right, thanks everyone for coming. And